Hazen section of DeLand is well known by the people who've been here many years. It's out where Lue Gim Gong lived. It's a part of the Hazen settlement. And Percy Hazen was an electrician around here for many years, as well as a orange grove owner. And this is the original Mr. Hazen's home out on Greensdale Road. And it is long since been torn down. But this is about 1877 when this house was built, and there's a big picture of it. It's out on Hazen Road, and Greensdale Road is where the settlement was. This is Mr. and Mrs. Hazen at the railroad there at Highland Park. And you see they've got a little 4-foot alligator there that they picked up. And this is Percy out at DeLand Springs, 1920, and his little runabout. I used to work with Percy as a helper for him when he was doing electrical work there for the Future Farmers on that building. I was his helper. And Harold Folkman, he married one of the Hazen girls and built a home down on Hazen Road just past the second Hazen family's home. This is the Hazen family reunion in 1950. And you can see Percy right in the very middle, standing in the back there. And then the rest of the family, I can't tell you who they are, but it's a pretty large family. This is Mrs. Wood and her daughter on Hazen Road. Again, look at the trees, all pine trees. This is Mrs. Woods and her daughter, who later became Mrs. Epps on Hazen Road. I also had a hotel out there at Highland Park, down where when you're coming off of the road, Glenwood Road, where you out where the dump was at for many years. You're going down to the fish camp today down there. You're in Highland Park. That's where the people would come to that were coming into to Glenwood. They would get off at the Highland Park landing, and they would come up to the Highland Park house. It was a hotel that stood just between the railroad and the Glenwood Road, and right on top of that hill on the south side of the road. Across the street was a little stores and a few other buildings there. There's nothing of any part of that remaining today. But this is an ad from the Highland Park house. We'll talk about Highland Park again a little later. The old store in Glenwood in 1922 is and the Glenwood Hotel was built by Isaac Sneed in 1888. And this is Mr. and Miss Wooley on the left on the porch in the 1920s. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. The hotel actually was built in several stages as part of the home out there today. That Mr. Sneed worked for the Bond Lumber Company, and he'd take part of his salary in lumber, and he started building this thing. And when they got it up to the first floor, ended up where we're going to start the second floor, he floored that whole thing in 2x6s or 2x8s, and he couldn't finish it, so he put a little railing around it. They had a skating rink up there, and the kids all came over there to skate on the floor of what would later be his hotel. The first school at the Hazen settlement was the corner of Hazen Road and Greensdale Road. The building is still standing there. Now, as the saying goes, that the gentleman that told them they could put the school in that building told him that Mr. Hazen, who they didn't get along, he told him if Mr. Hazen was ever elected to the school board, they would have to get out of that building. Well, sure enough, he got elected to the school board, and he kicked him out of the school. And then they went from there. This is just another picture of the house today. built actually in the 1880s. They went from there down to Highland Park again, almost across from the Highland Park Hotel. The man there let them have a building that they could hold their school in, provided they didn't say the Lord's Prayer. He was an atheist. And one day he walked in early in the morning and they were having prayer. And he told them that was it, get out. So they from there they went into Glenwood, and we'll speak about that when we get there. This is just a picture of the children that were at the school at Highland Park, and this is again another picture at the Highland Park School. This is a Glenwood school in the 1890s. Or Highland, well, actually still at Highland Park. There's another picture of this class there at Highland Park. After they had to get out of the Highland Park school, they went down to the Glenwood church, and they built an addition onto the church on the north side of the church. And to separate state from church, they did put a door between the two buildings. You had to go outside to get from one to the other, and that's how they got away from being able to have school and church in the same building at that time. And this is one of the classes there. It's another class there. The biggest boy there on the, I think is the teacher, and he's the second student on the left there. That's Percy Hazen. And there's some of the kids about 1915. The second and last school in down in Glenwood is still standing today. It's a private residence. It's on Grand Avenue, down, I think it's just the first street south of the post office street, but it's still wherever, right in there anyhow. And that building's still there. And when it closed, the students started going up to DeLeon Springs to school. There's a school on the corner. Actually, it was on the corner of Van Cleef Road and Grand Avenue. A lot of children out there then. This is another picture of it. On Church Street in Glenwood, going toward the railroad track, there's two churches down there. They were both black churches. One of them was the cemetery on down, the black cemetery on down at the end of the street there. And this is where a lot of the people, the men that worked at the Bond Lumber Company, this is the area they resided in, and they built the churches there. This is Grand Avenue, the main highway through town. You notice it's a divided road then, it still is today. Of course, then it was a dirt. This is Grand Avenue, 1910. It's been shelled with that Morrill shell. This is looking up towards, from the south, north towards the church. And this is looking south from Carr Street on Grand Avenue about 1915. See the big two-story houses along there. It's in Grand Avenue in the 1920s. The roads were shelled in. This is again Grand Avenue. This was actually, and you won't see it in here, but it was a hand colored picture. Again, this is Grand Avenue in the 1920s. Notice all the moss. Well, the moss disappeared around here a few years ago. You couldn't even find any moss. But it's come back, and what killed it, nobody knows, because you go up as far as Crescent City up there, there was always plenty of moss. And south of here, there's moss. And what killed it in this area, we don't have no idea. This is Grand Avenue in 1925. This is a colored postcard. This is Grand Avenue and the Glenwood Church on the left there. And this is right there Depot Street, which is right there by the side of the church. Grand Avenue in Glenwood. You notice the lady walking down the street there, in the middle of the street. Don't see no cars nowhere. There's quite a few cars today. This is Grand Avenue at the Glenwood Road in front of the Van Cleef's home. And notice the sign over the road there said, "You better come back." The other side of it says Glenwood. This is Mr. Van Cleef, 1900s. He worked at the Bond Lumber Company. He also had a general store downtown, and he built a nice home there, just on Grand Avenue, just before you get to the Glenwood Road. He built that house in pieces. He'd get enough lumber and money, he'd build another room on. And you can't tell it to look at it today that it was built that way. It looked like it was all built at one time. And this is Mrs. Van Cleef, the 1900s. She was quite a wonderful artist, and she was never well known or anything, but one of her paintings hangs in the land house. It's a beautiful picture of the St. John River. Mr. Glenn Van Cleef bought this Model T Ford back when it come out. So that's a fine looking automobile. These were fair weather cars, most of them. Gotta hope it don't rain. By the time you got something up to cover you up, you're done being soaking wet. It's 1918, and that's the first tag issued by the state of Florida. So not that particular tag, but the first year, I should say, the state of Florida issued license plates, and the numbers were painted on. And as soon as people saw what they'd done, they just went out and made their own tags, put on cars. So in 1918, they put on upraised letters like we have today so that they couldn't duplicate them. There's the Glenn Cleef's Model T. Henry Ford's answer to the poor man's dream. There's the Van Cleef's Model T again. Mrs. Van Cleef before her marriage. Miss Knowles was a nurse for Alice Van Cleef when she was born. This is Anne Van Cleef with the umbrella, and Alice Van Cleef, who was 4 years old at the time in 1910. Alice Van Cleef taught chemistry at DeLand High School for years and years and years and years before she finally retired, and she's continued to devote a lot of her time to working as at the hospital as a place where you bought cookies and donuts and stuff there at the hospital, the Birdfish Hospital. Nina Van Cleef, that's her mother. She's the one that was a painter. 1907, feeding their chickens. Everybody had a flock of chickens. And you get them for eggs. And I know my mother, when she wanted to kill a hen, she would try to pick one out that wasn't laying. She'd kind of watch them to see if it was laying. And if she'd kill one that was laying, or she'd almost cry that she'd killed a laying chicken. And so we didn't eat much chicken. If we ate chicken, it was on Sunday only. Now, one of the biggest things we eat, the way of meat, is chicken. We didn't have enough money to keep buying chickens all the time, so then we let the hens nest sometime to raise up a little bunch of chicken. We'd kill the roosters when they were young and eat them, fry them. And she didn't very seldom ever went down to the meat market and had them fix you a chicken. It cost too much money that we didn't have. And there's Mr. Van Cleef in a 1902 automobile. And that's a real fine car there. And this is the Glenwood Tennis Club in the 1890s. And a lot of little clubs like the baseball team we talked about, some of the other things they had in town. They had tennis clubs in each one of the little communities, and they would play each other. They also had bicycle clubs, and they would bicycle to each other's towns on Sundays and have a little picnic on the grounds and things. So these people made their own entertainment, and it was a wonderful type of entertainment that they thoroughly enjoyed. If you go back them days to days, you could really have a lot better society and dump the TVs and all and enjoy life like it's supposed to be enjoyed. This is a bicycle club in 1900s. And notice you don't see any of the big wheel bikes in here. Most they're just a regular. And they didn't call them bicycles, they called them wheels. And these are the men and the women with their wheels. And they would take off and go into DeLand, or they would go to DeLand. And I don't know how far they'd try to go, but for their Sunday excursions, but they had a lot of fun doing it. They didn't have much worry about getting run over by an automobile either. And there's a group of the ladies out at the beach in 1920. Notice those bathing suits. Now there's enough material in one of those bathing suits to make about 20 bathing suits today. This is an old organ out in Glenwood. You notice all the flower tuckets on it, and I don't know why, unless it's somebody's funeral or something, they're having something over, but it's a fine old organ. This is Charles and Francis and Etta Waterman. They donated the land for the Glenwood Church in the 1890s. These are two young ladies out in Glenwood. Notice their pretty dresses. There they are again in different dresses. Now these are people I don't know in Glenwood. Notice a bird dog, that gentleman. These people here, I don't know, the lady looks like she's a nurse. Here's another pair of unknowns in Glen. Look at the clothing they're wearing. Beautiful clothing. It must be in the wintertime because you couldn't stand that much clothing in the summer, I don't think. This is a couple of men out shooting a shotgun there in Glenwood in in the early 1900s. On the left this is Lottie Wood, Conrad, and John Conrad, Edgar Wood and Ethel Hazen Wood, Flora Wood Branning and Carol Branning in the 1890s. These are some of the ladies of Glenwood back in the 1900s. These are some of the people of Glenwood in later years. This is the oldest home still remaining in Glenwood. This Captain Gould lived here. He's now deceased. He was the oldest resident around here. He's part of the Gould family in DeLand here, and he was a captain in the Navy for many years. But this sits almost across the street from the home there at Glenwood today, back up on top of the hill there. This is one of the early houses in Glenwood. The people out in front of it. They had some beautiful houses there. Still some, but not all of them are there anymore. It's another one of the houses in Glenwood. It might be the, I don't think it's the Van Cleefs. But this is another group at Glenwood. It's a group at Glenwood. You notice they didn't worry much about yards back then. They didn't worry about the fertilizing grass and watering it and all that stuff. Most of them had dirt, and you just sweep it with a broom made out of some kind of bushes that you'd bind together, and you'd sweep it. It was just dirt. This is Glenwood, about 1900. This house is on the corner of Depot Street and Grand Avenue. It's across to the north side of the church. This is another picture of it. Another picture from a different angle. What's interesting about that house was they started doing some work on it, and when they started removing the siding, they found a log cabin actually that they just covered over with siding. So it was a very early house in Glenwood. This is out on East Lemon Street. This big house was. This is the house that was built, I would guess, somewhere around the 1960s. This picture was taken in the 60s, but the house was built much earlier than that, probably in the 30s, late 30s. This is Groveland Place, 1910. This is Conrad on the left at her home in Glenwood. Another home in Glenwood, about 1910. Winter home in Glenwood, 1920s. That means you just lived there in the wintertime. You went north in the summer. If it wasn't for air conditioning, there wouldn't be hardly anybody still in Florida. But air conditioning changed the whole world of this, because people would not live down here in the summertime unless you were born and raised here and you're used to it. This is a train wreck in Glenwood, about 1915. There's some more of it. Another part of it, you see the engine on the front up there. And this is the Rainey family out in Highland Park. Jake Rainey just died about somewhere around a year ago, and that's him in his mother's arms there. This is sitting out in Highland Park down by the river swamp, and this was the foreman's house that ran the farm there. That was a big farming area, and there grew a lot of celery. In fact, a lot of that land's owned by the state now. A lot of that land is go out there, you can still, if you probe around the ground, you'll find the clay tile, because they all had French drain in it, just like they had over in Sanford. The water could be pumped in it, it had holes in the bottom of it, so it would seep out into the soil, and it'd do that same thing in wet weather. It would help drain it off when we had a lot of rain. This picture was taken in 1926. There's one of the celery fields. They'd ship train boxcars full of celery out of here. And to look at it today, you'd never know it was there. It's nothing but woods today. In fact, my brother-in-law, Henry Myers, Daddy, he worked out there at that same house, grew and helped run them farms. And my brother-in-law, Henry, was born in that house too. This is their store and the celery there. And you see the boards up around. The celery had it boarded up so that it would stay a white color. It wasn't green like you get it today. Up until the Second World War, all the celery was grown this way, with boards up the side of it so it'd be white. And the war came on, they couldn't get the lumber, they couldn't get the labor, so they just let her grow, and it come out green. In fact, the first when I was working at Winn-Dixie, well, when Winn-Dixie was Lovett's then, back during the early 40s, when the war first started, they shipped in that green celery and the ladies wouldn't buy it. They said it wasn't ripe yet. But they put a sign up over the vegetable thing and said they put chlorophyll back in the celery. And that's exactly what they'd done. They let the sun color that thing celery and put chlorophyll in it. And there they are packing the celery in crates, getting it ready. If you notice that crate on the right there, you can see that the celery is white. It's not green. There's some more of the boxes of celery. It's very few people even know that there was a celery farm there. But I have clippings out of the papers, or seen clippings out of the paper back then telling how many carloads of celery they shipped out of there that year. And there it is being loaded on the railroad car. They were refrigerated cars to keep it cold till it got to market. At the end of Highland Park Road, where it comes up the river there, and that railroad crossing was not there for many years. It closed it up. And my dad and Harold Faulkman went to the county commission and asked them to see if they couldn't get that crossing put back in so that they'd get down to the river there to go fishing. So the county did. They got the railroad to go ahead and put a crossing back there. And they went down to the river there, and Mr. Roberts had a fish camp there, and he'd kind of run the place. He rented boats, and he'd watch after people's cars that come down there to launch their boat and everything. It's long gone. There's nothing there today. The fish camp is back to the north of that today. It's in Highland Park Run is still a favorite place for people to fish and to enjoy the riding around on. It's very pristine because most of the land is either owned by the state or by the federal government. And there's no houses on the river there, nowhere. At one time down at Highland Park, Lake Woodruff, there where Tick Island is, where they haul all the shell out, there was a man going to build a sportsman's lodge there. And he invested a lot of money into it. And he dredged up some canals through there, built and put in the pilings and all across the Highland Park Run, and carried it all the way up. Was coming out there at almost where the lakes connect there with the creek, and he was going to build that big hotel there and put a railroad from Glenwood down there to it. But I guess his wife's money run out, and it never was finished. In fact, when they opened that up, they had to go ahead and pull those pilings out, and the old canals, I guess, are still there, but they're closed up with debris and stuff for the years. But we used to go down and fish for warmouth in those canals in the summertime, in the fall or spring of the year, and really gets warmouth in those little canals. But those are gone now, and the man's dream of his hotel never materialized, but it sure was a good idea. But like I says, his wife money probably run out, and that was the end of it. Hope you enjoyed it.